So, anyway, BurgerKrieg. Now, this is nothing against BurgerKrieg right here. I actually kind of find the guy interesting. A little bit more centristy, center-left type of a political commentator, when he does commentating on politics anyways. But even outside of his politics, he goes talking about a whole bunch of nerd and nerd culture type stuff, talking about like computer games and lores, stuff like that. And it just, as a nerd, I get really rather intrigued by that. But also of the fact that the guy is a little bit more nuanced with his commentating. When it comes to like left-leaning political commentators, BurgerKrieg is like one of my top 5, I guess you could say, political commentators that I listen to that doesn't make me want to constantly bang my head against the wall. Like Kyle Kalinske does, or Progressive Voice. So the issue of this video right here is about Andrew Yang and his policies. Now, as you all may know, as of recently, Andrew Yang has suspended his campaign. It's 99% likely that he is not even going to be in the race, much less be president. But even if he's like dropped out of the race, and the fact that this video is old, even though this video is old and he's no longer in the race, I still find the subject matter, the politics that is mentioned by BurgerKrieg and advocated by BurgerKrieg in his support of Andrew Yang to be worthy of responding to. Not only because of the subjects themselves, but also because Andrew Yang, I have a feeling he has like set up a legacy for himself in kind of the same way that Bernie Sanders has set up a legacy for himself back in 2016 when he had that rise in popularity on the internet and whatnot.
He understands that small and medium-sized businesses are the real backbone of the economy, and he understands how technology can endanger them and make them thrive.
Even people on the right recognize that automation of industries and automation of business in general is a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, it's not a very controversial thing right there, Craig.
Build infrastructure, simplify taxes, give free financial counseling to all Americans. Basically, the idea behind that is that he will expand the IRS.
Okay, the whole simplifying taxes thing. I'm for simplifying taxes, but I'm also for lowering them. I have a feeling that that is something that Yang, neither you, Craig, are for. And on top of that, of what that Andrew Yang is going to be proposing, he is going to naturally feel like that tax hikes is going to be what's needed to make up for the spending that he was advocating and probably still is advocating for.
Give free financial counseling to all Americans. Basically, the idea behind that is that he will expand the IRS to...
People honestly do not have a right to financial counseling. Just saying.
Have a sort of department that helps average Americans make more money.
Why would the IRS be interested in that? Through the power of capitalism? Come again, says Invisible Hand. Yeah, that is a good point. That is actually a good point to make right there, because thanks for the comment right there, Invisible Hand. BurgerKrieg is kind of spouting off, honestly, a bit of cognitive dissonance in this point right here. He's saying, like, through the power of capitalism is how that Andrew Yang is going to revitalize the economy, but at the same time, institute all these new government programs. Government interaction, government action is not capitalism. Capitalism is the market freely and privately working without intervention of the government. Nothing explicitly needed or inclusive of government in the definition of capitalism, by definition. Well, to these people, anything involving money is considered capitalism, says JC Armitage. That's a good point.
He understands that new technologies need to be implemented for the people and not just for the oligarchs. And he also understands that the number one...
Well, I understand that should be allowed too. But again, should be allowed, not should be controlled and, and artificially engineered by the government. Let the free market decide as to who can access that machinery, through market pricing, etc.
He wants to support higher education, making all Americans capable of making better economic and financial decisions. Which is a huge problem, of course, in America, because most of the system is built into educating people so they will make bad financial decisions, so their money that they worked hard for can go to the very top, and because it's all a pyramid scheme, and those people will then also continue voting against their own best economic interests. You know, like libertarianism.
Okay, so it was a bashing on libertarianism. That is like a smear right there, if not an outright straw man. Like, libertarianism is not making sure that the money goes to the top, dude. It's to let the money flow as it will. People freely exchanging their money as they see fit. Mr. Strawman, give me a break, says Invisible Hand in the chat. Thank you. Thanks for the reference right there. And also, voting against their own best interest. I do not know. I cannot tell you of how many freaking times I have heard that on the internet when it comes to politics. This gets so freaking frustrated. Like, what do you know? What do you know about people's own best interest, dude? The interest of libertarians is property rights. And libertarianism allows that. Or libertarianism and property rights are private property rights, anyways, are explicitly intertwined with one another. Private property rights falls under libertarianism. I would have to find a better way to describe this, but the best interest of libertarians is to preserve their own private property rights. What do you know about people's own best interests?
There's really just one reason why the Yang Gang is in the house tonight. It's $1,000! That's his big thing, making every single American into a more powerful economic actor, allowing them to have more financial security and giving them the ability to spend more money on the economy. I've done a lot of videos on UBI. You know I'm an advocate for it. I will link them down below. It does not...
And I am going to link down below some videos from my 2 cents, most likely, because I think he explains as to why UBI is a bad idea a lot better than I could.
In fact, increase inflation, because that's not how inflation works.
Consider what happens when a UBI is permanently implemented on a large scale for a large country like the United States. If you simply provide everyone with a modest amount of cash, but not enough to live on, all that will result is a form of inflation. Since everyone has a little more money to spend, when they all go out to spend more, prices will rise to compensate for the increased demand. The initial spenders will get lucky, but once the price raises take effect, everyone will be no better off than before there was a UBI.
Probably the biggest reason as to why that I'm opposed to UBI is providing a universal basic income. I mean, especially when we get up to the tens of thousands of dollars per adult citizen, per adult American citizen, it's going to get pretty freaking expensive.
Author David Friedman states, economists are quick to point out that whatever savings might result from cutting out the existing safety net bureaucracy, they are likely to be far outweighed by the cost of handing an annual check for, say, $10,000 to every adult in America. Proposed amounts vary, of course, and are likely to be adjusted for those supporting children. It's generally assumed that existing healthcare financing programs would remain in place, as would Social Security. A rough calculation suggests that a $10,000 basic income, enough to lift the vast majority of Americans above the poverty line, would be at least twice as expensive as current anti-poverty benefits and overhead, adding between $1 and $2 trillion to the federal budget. Having the size of the check would go a long way towards solving that problem, but that would leave millions below the poverty line with fewer other programs to help. As Ted Cruz pointed out in his recent debate with Bernie Sanders, even if the U.S. confiscated 100% of the earnings of all Americans who make more than $1 million a year, it only produces about $1 trillion in tax revenue. What does this mean? It means that in order to provide a UBI of just $10,000, and even that is pretty modest to try and live on without working, it will mean massive tax increases on both the rich and the middle class.
It does not discourage people from working, because that's not the only reason people go to work.
No, not necessarily. Obviously, people are going to be doing what they actually like, but those menial, labor and just plain unlikable jobs. There's going to be a shortage in participation, in workforce participation for those sectors of the economy. If you're providing a UBI, you're therefore taking out the incentive to do those crappy jobs.
These studies may show that people who receive free money don't stop working, initially at least. I'm not going to dispute that. However, as Hilmar Schneider has noted, experiments are made that are supposed to demonstrate empirically that people would not or would only insignificantly reduce their working hours after the introduction of a UBI. These experiments are financed externally, and as such, the incentives for earning more than the UBI remain attractive because there is no necessity for internal financing. Furthermore, these experiments always cover temporary periods. People might therefore not quit their jobs just because they receive greater income temporarily, since they would risk longer unemployment after the experiment ends. Essentially, Schneider is pointing out that these studies have either been done on a small scale or are privately funded with money coming from voluntary donors. Stop and think about it for a minute. If someone just offered you an extra $1,000, would you turn it down? Of course not. It's not surprising then that if people, rich and poor alike, are temporarily given some extra money for a few months, they use it to enrich their lives with a new computer, or maybe they use it to help pay their school bills, or to make a new investment. This is the same thing that private employees do when they're given a one-time bonus or a temporary pay increase.
Wants to give average Americans the ability to engage in wealth building, and not the kind of wealth building that is currently common and popular in America, the kind of you will be a billionaire in 2 years kind of wealth building, because that's a pyramid scheme. Stop falling for that shit. Jesus Christ.
Well, what if people do want to become a billionaire, Craig? What are you gonna do about it then? Like, yeah, not everybody is going to become a billionaire, but what are you gonna do about it if people want to become a billionaire?
Also understands that unemployment isn't a very good metric to understand how an economy is doing, because he knows that you can have a full-time job and still not have enough money to feed yourself. That is a reality for a lot of people.
No, it means, oh God, it goes to show as to how productive a society is going in general. I mean, yeah, it does not reflect necessarily on how good that the living standard is for the people, but it still reflects a productive society. But on the other hand, I will grant that somewhat the unemployment, just looking at the unemployment rate by itself, that is not really that good of a metric to go off of by, honestly. You have to take into consideration the labor force participation rate as well.
At the same time, to prevent brain drain from like the top civil servants in the country, he wants to increase all of their salaries across the board. So basically, the people who are supposed to serve the American people are only accountable to the American people. He wants to...
And increasing their salaries is going to cause that. How? That doesn't make any sense, Craig, to be quite frank with you. A lot of this video is fluff. I'm going to be honest with you people, just a heads up, but I'm watching the entire video mostly because I barely remember it, but the stuff that I really wanted to respond to in this video is yet to come, by the way. So, hang on tight.
He wants to revitalize malls as community spaces, which is fascinating to me because I don't come from a place where there's malls. We learned in school that Americans go to malls on the weekend to have like community stuff, and they seem to be dying. I will at some...
Okay, no, just no, sorry. That's another big government waste right there. I mean, I myself am a bit of a fan of malls myself. Not gonna lie, peoples. I like to walk through and witness the architecture and all that kind of stuff. And I would supporting it. I do support the notion of supporting financially your own local business. That being including all the small shops that are in the malls. Just to make sure that they don't go obsolete. But at the same time, if by the economy they are just naturally going to become obsolete and become a thing of like the dinosaur, if they're just going to go the way of the dinosaur, well then so be it. I don't want the government to be getting involved and to be subsidizing them. To be subsidizing malls or even building new malls. Like imagine that. A whole bunch of government funded and even government ran and owned malls. That just, yeah, that's just not very competitive right there. Put it all under control of one big entity.
At the same time, he strongly supports the Green New Deal, which is one of the best things that has entered the conversation and even the legislative conversation for decades, really, in America. It would just massively increase the number of high-paying jobs. It would be phenomenal for the environment. And
yeah, at what cost? Bankrupting the entire economy? No thanks. I do not know if like this was happening as much back in March 2019, but fast forward to present day, the wind turbines are being just put in landfills and just essentially wasted once the wind turbines are done with in in the production of wind power, A whole lot of the Green New Deal includes like an implementation, a complete replacement of conventional energy with green energy in a too short amount of a time for it to be feasible. And not to mention, there's also the expensiveness of the freaking Green New Deal. That is probably the biggest reason, above all else, of why that we're all against it. Thank you, BurgerKrieg. And why we're against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. On top of that, also her anti-capitalism rhetoric.
this is true no matter what certain internet pundits with a huge hate boner for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would have you believe. He wants
You act like that there is absolutely no reason for anybody to dislike Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's not just because that, for arbitrary reasons. It's for very principle reasons. Principles that you may disagree with, BurgerKrieg, but still.
He wants to protect net neutrality and break up the huge ISP cartels to encourage actual competition, so people in America can have fast internet for reasonable prices, which, no matter what liars would have you believe, is not at all the case.
Okay, let's keep that in mind when he calls them liars.
He wants to introduce a department to the FCC that holds media outlets and other news organizations accountable for spreading false information. At the same
Okay, no, just no. This is what I remember right here. He wants to hold people accountable for spreading false information. He says companies more specifically, but that just sets up really, oh man. How do I exactly tackle this? To open up, the same big government that you want to serve you can also be turned around to work against you once you have your opposition in control of that government. For starters, and if you are going to essentially want some internet bureaucracy type of organization to be dictating on what is said on the internet to prevent lies supposedly from being spread on the internet, that is anti-free speech right there. Honestly. And notice how earlier he was like calling people liars for speaking against net neutrality, or for the certain ways that they're speaking against net neutrality. So I can only imagine that with the standard that BurgerKrieg once applied to this organization, that those type of people are going to ultimately be called liars by the bureaucracy and just be censored or punished or whatever. Maybe they won't be completely, utterly censored, but he wants people held accountable. Be it a fine or outright censorship, whatever the case may be, that is pretty anti-free speech. If you're going to be punishing people for speaking, quote-unquote, lies. I mean, to bring up an example, I have spoken out against Bernie Sanders' healthcare plan, said of how that it would increase federal government spending, by over $2 trillion per year. And I've been called a liar for that. If people within this bureaucracy that you're advocating for, Andrew Yang, were to have that type of mentality, that would mean that I would get punished for saying Bernie Sanders' plan is going to increase federal spending. Oh, you go say that? Censored, fined, whatever else. Oh, you are saying as to how net neutrality is a bad idea and how it will slow people's internet or whatever else talking point that you have, censored, fined, whatever. What is up, BurgerKrieg? I thought before that BurgerKrieg was like pro-free speech. Or at least in the past, I thought he self-proclaimed to be pro-free speech. But if this just goes running in contrary to that. If he actually advocates for this kind of shit right here, sorry, not sorry, BurgerKrieg, you are anti-free speech. And guess what? Like it or not, allowing free speech includes lies, or what you perceive to be lies about politics. I think I'm just going to end it right there. If I remember correctly, he's just going to be talking about the stuff that he agrees or disagrees with Andrew Yang on. But to sum up what I think about this video, and really this is like the video that exposed to me. Before this video, I did not know enough about Andrew Yang to have an opinion either way on the guy. Ultimately, I say that the guy has a likable personality, to be quite honest with you. But his policies are outright shit, like support for the expensive as fuck Green New Deal and support of an internet monitoring bureaucracy of sorts that would prevent misinformation, quote unquote, on the internet. Right. That is blatantly anti-free speech. And not just Andrew Yang. Tulsi Gabbard, in fact, supports sort of an organization that would be preventing lies, as fuzzy of a notion as that sounds, when really it's just a censorship group, to be quite honest. And that's probably the biggest reason why I'm against Tulsi Gabbard. And I can only imagine that Bernie Sanders supports such a thing as well. Because of that video, I watched that video like months back, and even looking back on it right now, I say fuck Andrew Yang. If Andrew Yang in the future wants to run for public office of some sorts on the same exact platform as that, being pro-Green New Deal, pro-expensive as fuck UBI as well for that matter, and also being pro-anti-lie legislation, anti-lie, quote-unquote, legislation for the internet, well then I say, with all due respect, but fuck Andrew Yang. Oh hey, you've made it to the end of the video. If you like what you see and hear, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button down below, please. If you want to see more content like this video is actually just a mere clip from a full live stream episode of my political show, Strike Force. Link down below for the full stream. Go check that out, and also subscribe and set the bell notification button to all to keep notified of this channel. I also have a BitChute channel under the same name, The Dark Conservatarian, and a Twitter and Subscribe star that may or may not be approved of yet. Links for those two as well in the description box. Hope to see you all later. Good day, and God bless.